Hey everyone, it's VHS Massacre Radio. I'm your host, Tom Seymour.
And I'm your other host, Ken Powell.
And we're here to talk about a fabulous movie today. Ken, do you want to do the introduction?
Yeah. Let me check back there with our main man, see if you can get that title for us.
Tim, you got the video for us
you
there?
guys totally just saw this come from my hand, but we'll just pretend Tim brought us the Final Sanction.
Wow.
Yes, this is... we don't want to dig too far into it because I think we got some other news before we start reviewing the Final Sanction. But it is directed by the same director of Deadly Prey. David A. Pryor, who sadly passed away just a few years ago, but not before making the sequel to Deadly Prey, The Deadliest Prey.
Well, maybe we could give that back to Tim until we actually hit the... Tim, can you grab that?
Hold on.
All right.
You guys totally can't see that there, right?
No, it's a...
That's we'll stick it here like this. There we go.
It's just part of the video shelf. I wanted... You talked a little bit about it in the sort of mini episode, but I wanted to hear about the field trip to the Troma set.
Yeah, so, for you guys that don't know, we're working on VHS Massacre, the sequel. And part of the process was interviewing Debbie Rochon back, it's probably been about a month now, when she first started working on Troma's Shitstorm, which I keep calling it Shitfest. So, after we interviewed her, she was able to get us an invite to the set. Unfortunately, Debbie had already filmed all of her scenes and, had left, after finishing all of that. So I went out to Troma set, which they were working here in Astoria, which is, really cool. Down on, I think it was like 14th Street 3rd Street and something. Is way out there. Part of Astoria I hadn't been to before. Not too far from the water. And in a kind of a crummier section. A lot of broken down houses and warehouses and a lot of construction going on. Kind of fitting for Troma. It's definitely part of Troma's image. Like the house that they were using for the production was it was probably like one good rainstorm from being condemned. But that's the Troma way. I'm sure they got it for the cheap. And those guys, they invited me out. They were very open to having me behind the scenes and filming these guys as they were setting up for their shots for the day. Unfortunately, again, we were catching them kind of on the tail end, so there wasn't any of the big stars that most of those guys had already finished up most of their scenes. It was a couple of extras doing some stuff, but I was able to get Lloyd in action a little bit. He came onto the set, and you could see the energy just change kind of when Lloyd appears. Again, a man that's in his 70s and still hanging out there with the youngsters. And it was a very hot, miserable day. Anybody that lives here in New York City over the last couple months can kind of attest. Day was no different. Humid. Yeah, we got the little rags here. It was fun. I got a lot of cool scenes. Unfortunately, there was no special effects shot that were being done that day. Didn't get to see any of that. I did talk to one of the special effects guys, though. He's a really cool guy. I can't remember his name offhand. But it was his first Troma film. And he's this huge, huge Troma fan. He's like, this has always been my dream of mine. And he was kind of living it out on the set. We talked a little bit about Lloyd. And, I think for a lot of people, when you don't meet Lloyd, it can kind of be intimidating because he's 40 plus years in the industry. A man who's, smart as a whip, and, knows the industry. But when you really, you start talking to him, or you realize, he's not the type that's going to, push you away, get away from me, or anything like that. He's very open. Right. He loves, having people there to cover his movie shoots, and because he knows it's going to be kind of free press, and, that, helps attract eyes.
Yeah, I think that's been a lot of the cornerstone of their PR is to go, to not spend a lot of money on PR, but to be out there as much as possible. So God knows how many cons Comic Cons or various horror cons that Lloyd goes to, but it's got to be in a year. I mean, he's traveling to easily 100 different places in a year, from screenings to cons,
Absolutely.
and always meeting fans and remembering a lot of fans, and so it's pretty amazing. There was the rumor that this was his last film, but Debbie Rochon had posted something about how they're greenlighting Toxic Avenger 5.
Ooh, that's big news.
Yeah. They didn't mention whether Lloyd was directing. I can't imagine he wouldn't be, but they, it's supposed to be. I mean, there were rumors of the Toxie twins for years.
Yeah.
And I think that's what it is. It's the children of the Toxic Avenger. So that could be a lot of fun,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if there is kind of going to be a final film for Lloyd, it would be more fitting of, not to say like, I don't know what Shitstorm's going to be in the end, but I think Toxic is more like that's the iconic character. That's the face, the logo of Troma.
He's their Superman, and then like Kabuki Man's their Batman.
Yeah.
And then
Dolphin Man.
Their Aquaman.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, they're Aquaman. Yeah.
Their Wonder Woman is Debbie Rochon.
That's actually that's a good pull right there.
It's like the DC lineup.
Yeah.
But better.
Oh, absolutely better. But you're right, though. Like, Troma is very open to working with fans, to working with documentary filmmakers. Lloyd has been in tons and tons of documentaries covering everything from, like our VHS Massacre and other VHS documentaries to movies that are more specific about B movies or exploitation. And he kind of has to be in a way. But he's also very open to, like you talk, being open with fans. He's also willing to bring fans in to be part of the production, which I couldn't imagine like somebody, like fans going up to Spielberg after a screening and being like, hey, and then him putting them on the set, in his next film.
Yeah, they. I know one of my students met Lloyd and showed his film at a screening, and Lloyd's like, "Hey, I like your film." They got to talking. And Lloyd was like, come by the set. He came by the set, and then he put him in the film, and they gave him a couple lines. And so, so that film student went from just screening a film somewhere to actually, being in a Troma film. It's like, as you and I got to be in the Troma film, boy, I ended up on the cutting room floor. I'm actually fine like that. I'm fine. I think it's a more interesting story,
Well, yeah, because I mean, for those that haven't heard the story, it's in one of our, I think, Cine episodes from early on. But Tom and I showed up. I think that was the day we were signing the contracts, right, for VHS Massacre.
Yeah.
Showed up. They were in the process of. That was the day that they were filming a scissor reel for, I think, Sci-Fi Network.
Yeah.
And then they were also filming scenes for Return to Nukem High Volume 2, and they were like. What was Lloyd said something about us? He's like they're too old to be students.
Oh, yeah. So John over there was like, "Hey, these guys, why don't we put them in the film?" And Lloyd's like, "Jesus, these guys look 80 or something." He said something crazy, and John's like, "Oh no, they're teachers." And he was like, "Oh, okay, that kind of makes sense. Like it did sort of make sense."
Yeah. Well, I mean, Tom and I both work at a school, so it's like, be teachers.
Makes sense, yeah. No. Luckily, a college.
Yeah.
I don't know if we could be in Troma films in high school, but whatever.
Yeah, it's kind of hard. But the great, just before I guess maybe move on from the Troma set visit, this goodwill that I think Lloyd has, it does have effect. Like I'm teaching a class, and at the end of the class, one of my students was showing something really offensive, and I was like, okay, we can't be showing this. It's like it's like I'm okay with offensive because I've done offensive things, but not everybody around you is going to be.
Yeah.
And then he's like, well, what have you done that's offensive? And I was like, well, I mean, VHS Massacre is not offensive, but it was with Troma, and some people could find them offensive. He's like, well, what's Troma? So I was like, okay, look, if you want to look at what a Troma is, go look at Poltergeist: Night of the Living Dead, of the chicken. Is it the chicken? Night of the Chicken Dead. And he looked at the trailer, and his mind was blown. And he's like, I'm going to go rent this movie. So it's kind of that goodwill that Lloyd has with people, that, the hopes that we'll go out there and kind of spread the word. And make other people, Troma fans.
Yeah, yeah. I'm so excited that he's doing another. He's harkening back to Shakespeare again, and he's getting Debbie in a considerable role again, and I think it's I think the Troma has sort of ebbed and flowed in regard to acceptability, and I think now is an unusual time. Like in one sense, people are really rallying behind Troma because everyone knows that these are films. It's fantasy. It's not real, and the characters are crass and they're colorful, and that's on purpose, and that's why people see Troma. They want to see something they've never seen before. So you can't do that in a safe way. And I've always regarded Troma films on the same level as I would regard Spielberg films. I've liked Troma films better than Spielberg films because at least Lloyd took some risks,
Oh, absolutely.
So it's like I put Lloyd, high up there with what he's doing, and I think, if you find things, if you're easily offended, you're kind of missing out on some of the other half of film. And if you look at a Lloyd Kauffman film and you dismiss it as like simple and stupid, you're really missing a lot of the picture. Like a lot of his films are riddled with environmental messages or messages about, be it Big Brother, government overreach, but especially corporate fascism, corporate overreach. The new one I think is going to hit Disney pretty hard and other various places, but if you watch his films and you pay attention, there's actually a lot more going on than you'd think.
Oh, absolutely. Like going back to that student, he was watching the trailer and he's like, "Oh, I get it. It's like they're going after fast food companies, which Poltergeist definitely makes it fun." He's like they're digging into the corporate side and environmental. Like that movie has all three of those messages, and the student picked up on it.
And this was like a decade before Super Size Me.
Yeah.
Lloyd and Michael Hers, they're doing this stuff. It's funny. They're like the Bernie Sanders of films, right? They've been saying the same message for 30 years, but it always seems fresh because the problems keep getting bigger.
For 40 years now.
40 years.
40 years. Yeah. I mean, which is amazing. And Toxic Avenger, an environmental movie made in the very, very early 80s, and still kind of the same message. The same message that wouldn't pick up for the rest of America to probably the mid 80s. I remember being a student, and the environmental message like kind of starting to hammer home. Like recycle and clean up after yourself, and make everything neat and clean, and Troma. And going back to Lloyd himself too, if you watch a Troma film and you're like, Lloyd keeps doing this because he can't direct, I'm telling you, if you were to give Lloyd any of these other scripts that Hollywood does, he could absolutely nail it too. Like, I mean, the man knows how to direct. If you look at what he does with those films and the little amount of money that they have and the resource, he actually gets everything that he can out of it. And, I'm hoping, just like Roger Corman got his day from the Oscars, that not that Lloyd needs it, and I mean, and I would love for Lloyd to actually be there though, just to kind of make those guys sweat it out too.
Yeah.
Like, what's Lloyd gonna say? But I think Lloyd absolutely deserves some recognition from the Academy.
Well, it's a strange thing too. Like Bob Briggs always talked about Herschell Gordon Lewis, and I watched a few of his films. Blood Feast, pretty awesome actually. Blood Feast is pretty awesome, and he was this really was a business person and got into. He was a marketing person and got into films from a marketing perspective, and that's all exploitation is. You're picking a specific thing to market. So Blood Feast was about blood and cannibalism and stuff like that. And so, that was someone, I think they said when he died, the New York Times were like, oh, he influenced all these people. And Bob Briggs was just calling out the hypocrisy of ignoring him, the guy's his whole career, Lloyd is more than that. Lloyd is somewhere in between. You know, he's not quite Roger Corman, but he's not Herschell Gordon Lewis too, because he's had in the 80s and 90s Troma had mainstream appeal from a Marvel comic book to a network children's TV series.
Yeah, with toys, like
toys. Yeah. So who knows what'll happen? You know.
I mean, like I said, I would love to see him get some recognition. I wouldn't want it to be in passing that he would finally start getting. I mean, I think New York Times has kind of always been a champion of Lloyd. They'll run features on him here and there. They'll cover him, but I would really love for Hollywood in a way, because if you think about all the people whose movies have passed through him, or like who started their careers with him, it's a pretty long list. Like, again, maybe not quite as long as Roger Corman, but Roger Corman also has been doing it for maybe even twice as long as Lloyd's been doing it.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, really the roster's gained, become more impressive over time. Like, if you think about when, people were talking about Roger Corman, it was like, whatever, 20 years after he'd started, people were like, oh my God, Francis Ford Coppola, Jack Nicholson, all these stars, Well, if you look at Lloyd now in 2018, it unfortunate what happened with James Gunn, unfairly, but James Gunn still, you cannot take away the mass success of him, Matt Stone and Trey Parker, Eli Roth. He's got enough. Marissa Tomei.
One of Kevin Costner's, I think, first films was through Troma. It was distributed by Troma, which that's a big deal too for an actor to have their first movie distributed. It doesn't always happen that way.
I think someone was saying even, I don't know if it's Sam Jackson or someone had some little thing anyway. But the point is, if you really look at like now, Lloyd is starting to, he's almost on this Corman level, because look at where the environment we're in, it's everyone's superhero crazy, and one of the most successful franchises, that person started out with Troma and still continues to work with them, because they were talking about Toxic Avenger 5, and it said in the article that James Gunn had worked on that script. So it's that's pretty fascinating just in itself.
Yeah, I mean, that would be kind of, I honestly, I'd rather for Lloyd to direct it, but it'd be kind of cool if James Gunn did come back and work on it in some kind of level, be a producer, or, it might need, because I think that was maybe several years ago, so it might need a little, a touch-up script-wise. Maybe he'll do that too.
Maybe James Gunn should direct it and just take it and just shoot the Toxic Avenger into this huge mainstream appeal.
Well,
and
he absolutely could. Just imagine James Gunn going and directing Toxic Avenger that's, made by Troma. Because, there had been talks, I think Lloyd at one time had sold some of the rights to Toxic, and Hollywood was going to make a version with John Travolta. But I'd rather see, like, Troma do their own version with James Gunn. That would be massive. And if it was James Gunn's first film after all of this Disney controversy, I think it would just do huge. And I know Batista is like one of the main actors that is like totally back James Gunn. Just imagine if they could get Batista in the Toxic movie, like if he's the villain, or if he's maybe one of the Toxic twins,
Toxie.
or Toxie. Yeah, he could be Toxie. I mean, that would be huge.
That'd be insane. Anyway, a lot of fascinating options,
No, it's kind of crazy, because if you guys followed Troma the last, I think maybe after Poltergeist up into Return to Nukem High, there was kind of like this period where there wasn't like a lot of output. It was almost close to like a good 6 or 7 years, but the last like 4 or 5 years, Troma is like, the wheels are really turning. It's great, because you had Return to Nukem High Volume 1. We're still waiting on Volume 2 to get a big release. Their, Shitstorm is being worked on right now, and this Toxic news. I mean, that's Troma's in high gear again.
Yeah, man. So we'll see what happens with that. Oh, so do you mind if I talk about some self-indulgent shit?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
We're talking about physical media, right?
Yeah, so, Tim, you want to hand me that Land of College Profits DVD? All right, thanks.
We got Tim busy tonight.
Okay, so this is the Land of College Profits. Let me put this up close.
Camera might like spaz out or...
I just popped the mic. That's all right. There we go. Land of College Profits.
And what is this Land of College Profits for the uninitiated?
Let's see. Let me just do this real quick. Yeah. Okay. So the Land of College Profits was a film. Really, we probably shot it in 2003, 2004. And then we put it out in 2005. And it's essentially low-level superheroes that work at a community college is the best way to describe it. That awaken a haunted wishing well called the Well That Ate Children. And it begins pumping toxic water into the water supply, and then people go crazy and get their own superpowers. And so it's a very strange film. It's a little embarrassing for me to watch now in 2018, given that, it's essentially 15 years since we shot it. And I really hadn't thought that much about it in a long time. And this podcast called B-Movie Mania did this super in-depth, more than a review. It's like a dissection of the whole film and examination in a way that I have to admit, they tagged me on it and they tagged VHS Massacre, and they've made these beautiful thumbnails if you look at their website. So check out bmoviemania.com or just Google B-Movie Mania. It's episode 12. And I was sitting down to eat lunch and I saw this thing and I started to get nauseous. I was like, I don't think I can listen to this, because I thought they were going to just shit on it all day long, and they would be within their rights to. I mean, that is film criticism, right? You know? And they were nothing but kind about it. And they saw some value in it. And they also noticed that this is one of the earlier, I mean, it's the earliest example I can think of that the sort of like backyard superhero thing. You could argue that Toxic Avenger was more than that, and even Handyman, I guess, is the closest thing I can think of before this in regard to the sort of backyard superhero.
Maybe Blank Man.
Blank Man, yeah. Blank Man.
I mean, Hollywood's had like a kind of a flirtation with the idea, but they've never really, I think, done a decent enough job that would catch on until kind of like later on with going back to James Gunn with Super.
James Gunn's Super.
The Hit Girl, what was that franchise?
Oh, Kick-Ass.
Kick-Ass, yeah, kind of.
But the thing with Kick-Ass is that was, I don't know when that was first written, but that was written probably way before this. But if you go back to actual comic book, I'm sure you could find that shit in the 70s. I have no idea, but as far as films, you didn't see that much. There was one called Defendor with Woody Harrelson, where he was like a low rent superhero, and then there was one with Michael Rappaport. I forgot what that one was called.
Yeah, I'm totally blank on that one.
But there was a slew of them, but this was like possibly 5 or 10 years before that, and we actually, so this was distributed by York Entertainment. And York Entertainment got into all the Hollywood videos and movie galleries at the time. And that was like a huge deal for us. But when we submitted the film to companies for distribution, we submitted to Troma. This guy, Edward Haven, we submitted to them. They wanted it. And I remember getting the email, and he said, we do think this film is worth distributing. And my mind didn't want to accept it. And I literally read it as this film is not worth distributing. And I was depressed the whole night, went out with my brother and we drank, and I was depressed. And they're like, well, show me the email. And so show them the email. And they said, they want the film. they wanted the film. And what it was is, at that time in 2004, I guess it was, I talked to Lloyd, and Lloyd had said, look, we like your film, but you're never going to make any money with us. And at the time, we had spent $12,000 on Lana College Profits, and we were just not in a position. I wanted to put it with Troma, but we thought if we went with York, we'd have a better shot to recover money and then get in larger venues. And what happened was they screwed us. We never got York. York screwed us. We never got paid anyway. But we did get in all the video stores. And so this kind of walked me down memory lane, and it kind of made me realize, like, at the age of 41, I'm a direct-to-video director. Like, I have to admit that's what I am. So.
Well, but going back to the B movie Mania guys, again, yeah, Tom had sent me the link to it, and I listened to it, and I'm like, it's definitely a very. I mean, they kind of developed their own mythos with the movie, which is kind of cool. And like one of the guys that talked about, and this is what I've always felt like with the Atlanta College Prophets, he had seen it years before, like maybe around when it even was, I think, first released. It was a while ago, and he basically saying like he didn't like it then, but he went back and for this movie, for the review, he watched it again, and he absolutely loved it. And what I think is, and how I felt about it, is that kind of humor wasn't as popular then as it is now. I think like that kind of humor that's in the movie, where you have kind of, I mean, it's very, abstract's not the word that I'm looking for. It's
random, or
no, yeah. I guess there's some kind of randomness to it, but there's a word in my mind. I can't think of it right now. Can't remember it now. But it's kind of humor that I think really popular right at this moment. That a lot of people like a Dan Harmon and these guys are kind of using that again. Didn't catch on. Like I think even Dan Harmon with his he had this pilot he shot called Heat Vision and Jack. And it was starring Jack Black, and he had this motorcycle. They talked to him, and it was kind of similar in some of the humor in the same way. And that pilot got rejected. And I feel like today, if they were to make that same pilot, easily be picked up, would run for 5 seasons, it'll be a huge critical success. So what all this is I'm trying to say is I think that I didn't see it until maybe, I think it was 2011 or 12 when I first watched Atlanta College Prophets. That it was ahead of its time, and the humor, for me, whenever I watched it, absolutely worked. I thought it was funny. And these guys absolutely thought it as well. I mean, they loved it. They liked a lot of the mythos and these kind of like stories that aren't really explained. It's kind of like this thing exists.
This thing happened in the past, and because it was constantly referencing and showing flashbacks to like seemingly other storylines and things like that. And they were like dead on. They were very polite about it. Obviously, there's just some things that are so low rent and cheesy and clumsy about it. But they were very sort of polite about it. Yeah. And they really, they did see what we were going for. It was almost like what we were trying to do is like if you had a standalone film and it gave the sense that of world building. Like this was one movie, and there was these other 3 movies that you never saw. Yeah. So that was the aim.
One of the things, like, and they saw it that I always liked about it too. And a very specific thing is, I can remember the character's name. I'm going to say Roy, but I don't think it's Roy. It's the guy that wore the army fatigues. Yeah. And it's this very kind of like matter of fact way that you're like, because at first you think, oh, he must be like some kind of ex-soldier, but it's like. He worked at a chicken place that they wore.
Sergeant Poultry's,
Yeah, they wore an army. But it was kind of a matter of fact. It wasn't like, in a lot of humor, that there would be like, if somebody was to say that, it'd be like, ha ha ha, he worked at a Clucker's or Sergeant Poultry. Yeah. It was very kind of, like I say, again, matter of fact. Like,
we did try to, like, everything was supposed to be rationalized. Like, Midas had it like him and his three henchmen. They were all wearing security cards because that was their job. My character's the only one where it was like, my father was a priest and he gave me the clothes, and when I put on the clothes, I felt like I would do less evil, right? So that was like the angle with that. And then every Billion Million, they were sort of like blue collar, so they had their outfits. And Third Lorette Jones was possessed by the water, and he turned blue, and so there's some magic woo in there, as they call it. But it was like, we were trying to rationalize everything very clearly, so that was like a goal, but anyway, so thank you to the B movie guys. But I was just thinking about the course of my career. It's like I really started in the late 90s, and you could say I in one way belonged to that late 90s indie film movement, even though I was at the very, very tail end of it, because I think Thrill Kid Jack was the first video feature. It was unwatchable. It was like us running around in our underwear, basically. And there was that, and that was in the late 90s, and then Everything Moves Alone. I think we shot in 99 maybe, and that had a theatrical run in New York, so I got a little taste of being part of the theater culture. And then Lana College Profits was Hollywood Video and Movie Gallery. Later, Bikini Bloodbath and Lana College Profits were on Netflix, and then London Betty was on Blockbuster, and that's gone. And now with VHS Massacre, I'm on Amazon Prime. And so it was kind of like a realization. It's like, like trying to say, oh, well, I did all this work. I won all these awards. I do have this like news background and worked on some Emmy-nominated stuff. But really, for my own work, I'm a direct-to-video guy. It was a kind of a realization, like, at 41, I need to just start owning that. I'm a direct-to-video guy. So that's kind of the conclusion I came to.
I mean, that's it, and I think there's nothing wrong with being the direct-to-video guy. I mean, honestly, like, to be able to say that today I think it's even a smaller percentage of people than it used to be maybe 15 years ago, because I mean, very much content is being released in a direct-to-video way these days. It's like, that pool is, closing in, and the discussion I have with the professor about physical media and going back to the exploitation stuff and how we're losing that stuff, and I feel like we're also losing some of our direct-to-video directors, and those are jobs and careers. The pool is, kind of dwindling as well.
Yeah, I mean, there were, my friend Chris Doyle would talk about in Hollywood, he would say, there are some mansions on the Hollywood Hills that were from direct-to-video directors. Like, that's all they did, and it was a real living at some point, 70s with grindhouses and theatrical drive-ins, 80s with home video, 80s and 90s with home video. So pretty fascinating.
Yeah. It was great to be able to listen to that review, and again, I kind of had a similar experience with the VHS Massacre review this week as well. Whenever for you guys that don't know, we're now on Spotify, and during this process of getting Spotify set up, was searching through iTunes for VHS Massacre, and a VHS Massacre popped up on somebody else's podcast, and then I realized it was a VHS Massacre review. And it was the same thing of I don't want to sit down and listen to this, because it's just this fear. And we've gotten plenty of positive reviews for the movie, that anything negative now I don't think would affect me, but you still don't want to sit down and listen to something and hear somebody completely shit on it. I wish I remember these guys. Flesh Wound Radio, I think that's the name of the podcast, if you guys want to check it out. It was, I think, less of a review and kind of a way of using our documentary to springboard into the topic about physical media and their own collections and things that they like to collect. And the movie has kind of been that kind of thing for a lot of people. There was a group, I think, down in Virginia maybe that had their own VHS Massacre hunt that was using the movie as kind of like a springboard for that. But the guys, they seem to really enjoy it. So it's like sometimes you got to just dig in there and read the review and see what people think. I mean, it does feel good whenever you hear something positive.
Yeah, I think I listened to that one. It was pretty good. Yeah, I felt the same thing. Just examining essentially the culture of it. But
yeah.
no, I mean I'm excited about part 2. At some point we got to talk to Debbie about trying to get another Bob Briggs interview. She had said he's on board for it. We just gotta contact him, set up a date.
I'm excited for that one because just in the shorter period of time, a lot has changed for Joe Bob himself that we can talk to, including the evolution of the industry itself. Because that last interview I think was in 2013, so it's been 5 years, almost 6 years since then.
Yeah. So that'll be really cool. Well, what do you think? Should we get to the old? Should we ask Tim to? Hey Tim, can we get that Final Sanction?
Yeah, put it back on the shelf and then bring it back to us.
There we go.
Final Sanction, yes. Yes, this sweet VHS. I know I hate to destroy the illusion, but this actually isn't the real VHS. It's actually pretty kind of hard to find. So we have the Final Sanction, again, starring...
Is that a little... Oh, it's got a sticker. It's got a fake sticker on it.
Yeah, I found a website that they had uploaded both sides of it, and then the backside is actually my own creation. Like I created that. Nobody actually had the real backing of it. But the Final Sanction, directed again by one of our favorites. Of the best worst type films, if you want to call them that. Deadly Prey. This is David A. Pryor, starring his brother Ted Pryor, who, for some weird reason, I kept calling him Mike Pryor to my wife because she wanted to look him up because she's like, he looks exactly like Christian Bale. And she's like,
he does.
And she's like, he kind of sounds like him too. And I'm like, I guess. I guess just because I had seen him from Deadly Prey, like I kind of already knew who he was. But she kept looking up this Mark Pryor guy, and I guess there's a baseball player named Mark Pryor. And I was like, no, that's not him. We eventually figured it out, though. It's Ted Pryor. But also starring another one of our, I think one of our favorite B-movie actors, Robert Z'Dar.
The Face.
The Face.
Yeah. Robert Z'Dar. I love Robert Z'Dar. He's, I mean, one of my favorites is Samurai Cop. He was Maniac Cop too, I think.
Yes, he was in the sequels as well.
Oh, okay.
There's a couple sequels.
So that's one of his iconic roles, Maniac Cop. I gotta watch that. Maybe we should watch those again. That would be fun. Yeah,
we should. Yeah, maybe that'd be our next review. Maybe we'll do that trilogy. I think it's a trilogy.
Oh, that would be great. He's just, how do I describe it? Like, he takes his roles very seriously, and I mean, it can't have been easy growing up with a jawline like that. I mean, the guy is just...
Speaking of his jawline, I have the VHS Lopedia, so this is where I'm going to be pulling my facts anytime that we use in the show. And according to the VHS Lopedia, his jawline is actually from a disorder called tuberous, where like the part of the bone is missing in the jaw, and it causes it to look that way. For some kids, it stops at an age of the disorder. I guess it kind of like, I don't know if it like regresses or whatever, but for others, it maintains its way until adulthood, which I think he's one of those. But in a way, like, yes, it's a terrible thing. Probably through school, it might have been hell, but for his Hollywood career, though, was absolutely not a necessity, but set him apart from a lot of other faces out there.
Oh yeah, he just I remember him in Tango and Cash, and it's like, I think, was it, Stallone goes, I broke that guy's jaw, and then Kurt Russell goes, you broke that jaw? you know, and he just became this, almost like supervillain. You know, he was like, oh my god, you know, look at that guy, like, just look like the toughest tough guy, essentially. You know.
Yeah, yeah. Well, according to VHS Wikipedia, he also was a college football player and a Chippendales dancer at one time. And I couldn't figure this out, but he was also a member of the Chicago Police Department. And I don't know if he was a Chippendale dancer and a member of the police officer in Chicago at the same time, or if it was like one or the other.
He was like a real maniac cop.
Yeah. Yeah. Once he had finished college, he joined the police force and was a Chippendales dancer. But then transitioned over to Hollywood. And again, like we say, a lot of iconic roles, including Samurai Cop, which he dons an actual beard for that. And my wife Christy's like, looks a lot better with the beard.
Yeah, he looks better with the beard. Well, depending on what you mean by better, right? Because in Final Sanction, he was
attractive.
Yeah. He was pretty.
He was buff. He was like he's always been like kind of a meat tank, but in that movie he looked. And honestly, I feel like of all the Zadar movies, this might be some of his better acting in terms of like the beginning whenever they were torturing him. Yeah. I don't know. There was some like really intense scenes, and he was believable as a guy that was like, you know, having these, I guess you would call them visions or manifestations, being this tormented Russian soldier.
Yeah, and he's essentially being programmed. They don't get into he's got these electrodes hooked up to his head, and he's doing that. It's like some kind of training where the Russians are giving him these visions that he has to overcome. Yeah. And the whole goal is self-preservation. So it was like, one of the things is like, don't kill yourself no matter what. And so it's like a vision of his mom, and it's like, if you don't shoot yourself in the head, they'll shoot me. And he lets his parents die and all that. And they're like, oh, he's perfect. He's the perfect soldier. But I guess we should talk about the plot line.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
Sorry, it jumped in ahead, but
no, yeah. Well, I just like I was thinking of Zadar and that performance, and like I really loved the beginning performance. But yeah, I think the plot it's essential to this movie.
Well, it reminds me of Robot Jocks, which I think I don't know if that's Robot Jocks is Charlie Band actually who produced it. Anyway, what it is, it's the Cold War, and they just barely avoided nuclear annihilation. And so what happens is Russia and the United States agree to come to terms, and they decide that the best way to settle the fate of specific battles or wars is to have their best soldier from each side go into this, whatever.
It's like a 20-acre arena. A setting, I think it was in Virginia.
And then to just kill each other. And so that's the setup. So the American picks their best soldier and Russia picks theirs. Now, the Russia one, Robert Zadar, you kind of get it. Like, oh, yeah, this guy's a super soldier. He's amazing. The American side kind of makes no sense to me, really.
It doesn't, but there's also, going back, there's a couple things I want to say about the beginning of the movie starts off with basically kind of like a nuclear war between both sides. They show, stock footage that we've probably all seen like 100 times by now of nuclear weapons going up in the air and the destruction. But in the text, it was the bombs that hit in the United States landed on the military bases. They said it killed tens of thousands, which I don't know, kind of felt like a low number. It wasn't like, oh my God. I feel like it should have said millions, but I'm assuming that it killed most of the main military people.
I missed that.
That was my assumption. Yeah. And that this guy that was in the military prison was kind of like the last good soldier, even though he was in prison for supposedly getting his
that makes sense.
Murdered.
So the active duty people were all annihilated.
Yeah.
And because he was like in the brig or whatever.
Yeah, in Fort Leavenworth, which isn't actually an active duty base. Besides a few little military generals that we see occasionally, we only have like this. I forgot his name now.
The other character was training him.
Well, no, Ted Pryor's character was Sergeant
Botanic.
Botanic, yeah, Sergeant Botanic. He's the last Rambo figure which this movie definitely has a couple, I think, nods to Rambo. Zidar's character runs around with a bandana and looks kind of similarly built to Stallone.
Yep.
And then Botanic is kind of like, a loose cannon type soldier.
Yeah, that makes so much more sense for me now. Okay.
It happens, like I say, again, it's happening early on. And before we move on from the nuclear thing, too, they show, like, the two different sides, Russia and the United States, kind of reactions to this nuclear war. And I always find it funny, like, a lot of images shown of Russia, like, in this period is always, like, older people. And then the people that they chose for America, like, they show a bunch of students, they show, like, younger working age people. But in Russia, it was, like, these older, like, in their work clothes, or, like, the handkerchiefs around their neck. It's kind of like a stereotype. I don't know. It was just a little something I noticed and just made a little check mark of like, oh, that's kind of weird.
Yeah, right. That makes sense for the time period. Like that's how it was represented. Yeah, that's pretty fascinating.
Well, it didn't show any Russian children, so I was like, maybe they didn't want you to kind of feel as much for the Russian side. Then they showed the American school children.
Well, the actor William Smith, when he pops up on screen, I'm like, I know that actor. Yeah. And he starts doing a Russian accent, and you're like, "Oh, come on!" But as it goes on, I buy it more and more, and I think it was because I think I remember him from Any Which Way You Can, and I think he was also in Any Which Way But Loose. But I think he was the biker gang villain. So it was Clint Eastwood with the monkey. It's a Clint Eastwood monkey film. They're fucking great, by the way. So he's like one of the villains in that.
He's also in BJ and the Bear, a movie about another monkey. I mean, not a TV series about a monkey in a truck. He was also in Red Dawn, which he played another Russian. He was in a ton of, like, if you can think of any 80s series and kind of throw a dart in it, he was probably in, like, Simon and Simon, I think The Fall Guy. He's a very common face if you had, I think, been a child or an adult in the 80s and you watched a lot of TV. Guest starring. He was in Nash Bridges, Walker, Texas Ranger.
Oh, really? Okay.
Ton of work. Like, he has that face where you're like, I know him in something.
Yeah, it just, now I'll never forget because his name's fucking Will Smith.
Yeah, not that Will Smith.
Yeah, and I'm sure he goes by William Smith. But yeah, so I really like this movie. Not only did you have some good, 80s war tropes. Botanic has these, bad one-liners.
Yeah.
I think.
Well, there's that one where he's like, "Join the army." It
was like a Die Hard rip-off line, right? He's like, "See the world, join the army."
Well, I looked it up specifically because when I heard the line, I was like, I've heard this line before. Apparently, this has been a common phrase for almost 60-something years. Like, it had been common with the military about, because the Army has been like, join the Army, see the world.
Yeah.
And so I guess there was some kind of satire article or something in the 40s that it was like, join the Army, they said, and see the world, they said. So even the Die Hard is kind of a ripoff of that.
Oh, wow. See, this is awesome.
Yeah, that's from the Wikipedia. Yeah,
VHS Lopedia.
VHS Lopedia. Trademark.
It's so funny you said that because I think SNL did a parody commercial of the Navy. It was like, join the Navy, see the world. And then it was just 30 seconds of Navy men just washing shit. Like doing dishes and scrubbing decks, and it was like, join the Navy, it was just all hard labor,
And for you guys that might be on the edge of deciding to join the military, I can tell you that is a very true image, even for the Army, the Marines. You do a lot of other stuff of like mowing yards more than you do sometimes of action. So a very true commercial.
Well, speaking of Action International Pictures, AIP, produced this thing. That's a company that put out a ton of great stuff in the 80s and 90s. But what I realized is that FilmRise bought their bought some of the AIP catalog. So if you watch this Final Sanction, the first graphic you'll see is FilmRise. And FilmRise actually did the distribution for VHS Massacre.
Yeah.
So I thought that was a fun
little connection.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think a few of the films that we've reviewed over the last couple of months might have also, I think maybe some of the Bronx movies might have been through FilmRise as well. The guys have been building up quite a bit of catalog, I guess.
Yeah, and I see the value in it. I think I hit this same note a lot, but I have a deep appreciation for these kind of films. Whatever the budget was on this, let's say it's $200,000 to $300,000. Is that high?
According to the VHS Lopedia, it was $250,000.
Oh,
that's
okay.
estimated.
Estimated $250,000. So, if you look at the amount of time and effort, to cast this, go to those locations, use squibs. There's a lot of good explosions, real explosions, and there's just always going to be this deep appreciation of they didn't green screen it. It's not a bunch of shitty digital effects. This was all real. They were there. Sets like that were grueling. You're working very long days. They probably shot the thing in less than a month. And this type of film is much rarer today. You're just not going to see it made the same way. And I never made a film even on this level. Like my biggest budgets were at the max about $15,000. So when I get to see a new one, like this is totally new for me. I've never seen it, and so I love that. It's like a little treasure. It's a window into how they made films.
Yeah, absolutely. And if I had I think I loved it too. If there's any gripe, it would be that I wish they would have started off with maybe a team against each other, because it's only in the opening scene whenever they're the opening fight between the two, and they're in this little tiny forest with really small trees, and they're shooting machine guns at each other, and they're never hitting each other. And I'm it makes them kind of look both weaker because they're supposed to be badasses. It's if they would have started off with a team and they would have taken out each other's team.
Yeah.
Then it'd been them two. It was it had made them seem even bigger and more badass.
Yeah. The only setup we get is Botanic has a kind of clumsy fist fight prison scene.
Yeah.
So he's a tough guy.
Yeah.
And then Zadar, you just have to look at his face, and you're like, oh. There is an opening scene of him. He's got these shovels, and you squeeze the shovel, and then the shovel blade flops out. So it's like a military shovel with a sharpened edge. And there's a scene of him just throwing shovels and hitting targets. It's pretty weird.
Yeah, it was. I mean, because in the Army, we get those. They're called E-tools, entrenching tool. And I'm like, it's kind of weird that they show him getting ready for battle, and he puts two of them, he opens up a case that's got a whole bunch of them. I'm like, okay. Yeah. It's this is kind of daring. I like the choice, because it's in Hollywood, it would have been maybe a knife set, and they'd be like, oh, okay. But the choosing of an entrenching tool, and honestly, the entrenching tool is awesome. I love it, because it's on one end, it's kind of serrated, so you can use it to chop stuff. The other side's kind of sharp too. You can dig stuff with it. It's an amazing tool. We used it all the time in the military, but never, and we're told that we could use it in combat, but to actually see it as a tool of choice was kind of badass in a way, but kind of weird though the first time you see it.
Also a throwing. I don't know if it's balanced for throwing. You could kill someone with that thing.
Oh yeah, absolutely. You could kill somebody with them, but as a throwing object, it's not an axe. An axe has got some balance to it. The entrenching tool honestly doesn't. If you pick up one, they're very, very light. So the idea of using it as something to throw and kill somebody, a little ridiculous. But again, it's daring. It's the kind of chances that I think a lower budget movie like this can take, that Hollywood would just automatically go with the throwing knives or ninja stars or something.
Yeah, there is this sense, right, that mainstream cinema won't even bother to do something weird because they'll know the backlash will be, just they're going to get shit on by social media. Oh, you idiots, why'd you use this? So it's so everything ends up being so similar,
Well, you'd have something like the Mythbusters of the world be well, according to the science, the blah, blah, this, and the mathematically, they wouldn't work as a throwing weapon. It's like with the movie like this, they don't care. They don't have to worry about that. I mean, it was the '80s also, and it wasn't as much instant reaction to things, anyways. And it might have all been a simple fact is somebody that was working on the movie had a collection of these entrenching tools that he had at his store. It was like, let's use these as a prop, and that'll be badass.
This is interesting. Oh, I like how this flips open. Let's use that. Yeah. I wonder if you could help me with this. So the main character is in prison because he killed 4 soldiers and they charged him with attempting to kill the Secretary of State.
Yeah, that's like, I don't know if the killing the 4 soldiers happened at the same time that he attempted to kill the Secretary of State, or if that was like a separate charge. We can get into spoilers, but we find out that this other soldier that's at the beginning of the movie, whenever Botanic is released, like they're talking kind of shit about the one guy's like was like fuck you, and then Botanic's like I would like that or something weird.
Yeah,
that was like
what did he say, like anytime?
Yeah, something like anytime. It's like that's kind of weird.
Yeah,
it's like it's usually be the other way. Like the other guy's like fuck you, and I was like I don't know. It was kind of weird, but that guy, that army soldier, and turned it out to reveal at the end of the movie that he's the one that killed everybody in the platoon. And so, Botanic and him have a little quick showdown.
And I love how that, they put this thing in his brain so when he refuses to follow orders, they can hit a button and they can shock him. So there's this female lieutenant on the other end who is initially shocking him in order to get him to go along with the plan. And the whole thing is just funny because, that's one part of it, but he's like, I'm not doing it unless you pardon me. So they're like, no problem, here's the pardon. So he gets a presidential pardon like this, which would make sense given if he's the best soldier and the rest of them are dead. Okay. The one problem is the other guy who did frame him was another elite soldier.
Yeah.
Who they didn't pick. But then also the fact that the Secretary of State would, it's like, if someone would try to kill the Secretary of State, I think they would be immediately killed. I don't think there'd be any trial.
They said he attempted, right?
Yeah.
So it's
like Condoleezza Rice, and he's like,
yeah, if you try to kill Condoleezza Rice, I don't think there's anything in the world that will probably get you free on those charges. Especially like you say again. The other guy that had framed him was supposed to be another elite soldier because there was a comment about like, how does it feel to finish second again or something like that. So the other guy is a badass too, supposedly.
Yeah, it's interesting. Oh, so things I thought were funny, like in the gear up scene, he's got an Ozzy Osbourne patch, and I think like that's like, it is kind of badass actually. I like Ozzy, but that circa like 80s like rebellion, like Ozzy, man,
Well, I thought for a moment, because you could see it, I was like, maybe whenever he meets Zadar's character's name is Sergi, I thought like there might be a moment where like Sergi would see the Ozzy and that'd be like a kind of connecting moment, and he'd be like, oh, Ozzy rules.
Yeah. There's a scene, okay, so they're fighting each other a lot. At one point, Botanic almost gets murdered, but then he gets shot in the leg and then puts a bunch of plastic explosives on the ground. And for some reason, uses a roll of quarters to put a smiley face on the concrete. Robert Zadar's character, Sergi, walks in, looks at the smiley face. The bomb goes off. Next time you see Sergi, he's just like horribly burned. Awful on the one side of his face.
But in terms of like the explosion, it would seem like it should be a fatal explosion, no matter how bad. I mean, because the thing blows up, and it's kind of like, yeah, nobody should survive it.
He would be like a blackened skeleton.
Yeah. If anything, his whole face should have been covered in black, and then maybe have him running around. But I thought, like, again, for a low budget movie, it was very convincing makeup. Like, it was a pretty good makeup.
Oh, it looked awful. Like, I mean, it worked. Like, it all worked. You're like, oh shit. Like,
kind of the moment when you forget about where the explosion took place, and they move on to the next scene. It's like, oh yeah, he's burnt up. He's he's got that crisp thing going on.
Yeah, like we're supposed to believe he jumped out the window last minute and got there's a scene that is right out of Rocky 4 where he rebels against his Russian master and he says, "No more orders. Now I fight for myself." And it's very Drago.
Yes, very, very. Yeah, I mean, again, this could be its own genre too, of the Russians teaming up with the Americans or whatever, the unity type movies. I mean, we have Final Sanction and Rocky 4 so far, and there's probably a few others out there in that genre.
And the old trope where they decide to fist fight only because it's the end of the film, essentially,
yeah.
is you see it over and over. There's always like Samurai Cop 2. It's like, why don't you fight me like a man? And then they drop all the weapons and then they fight. In this one, it's a little stranger because the one of Botanic's, that number 2 soldier, turns on him.
Mm-hmm.
Sergei shoots that guy in the back, and then what does he do? He drops the gun and then they fight.
Yeah, he drops the gun and fight. Yeah,
because he thinks it's dishonorable or something.
Yeah, but he shot the guy in the back. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah,
it's kind of weird. Yeah, but Sergei kind of I guess that's like the first real moment where we see like Sergei and Botanic might become friends out of this. He saves Botanic from being killed by this dickhead. So
yeah. But I liked it. Let's see. The ending is like a Bizarro Street Fighter 2 ending. Because at the end of the film, they just fight. They decide that they're not going to kill each other, and the American general decides to just bomb the whole area, so both sides die. So it's a stalemate. And I think that's how they want to keep running it. Perpetual war with perpetual ties. Yeah,
because it's like, Russia won't be disgraced, America won't be disgraced, and neither one will be defeated. So they can keep, returning again. And, for the military, it becomes a boon because there's constant war. That the Cold War is now kind of in a way become a hotter war, but not a full escalation. So
yeah. The only thing that doesn't make sense to me is especially in the United States with the military-industrial complex, you'd want more gear.
Yeah.
More the goal would be to keep building more.
Yeah. Mass production of goods is more money versus like if you have this single fighter system,
you can't rationalize spending. Yeah. And see, that's why Robot Jocks to me makes more sense. It's the same thing. Cold War. They build giant robots and they fight each other. That, you're like, if the government's like, oh, we spent $1 trillion on military spending, you'd be like, I believe it. There's a Godzilla-sized robot that you have to rebuild every month. So I totally get that. So that makes more sense to me in regard to how a government would actually spend and work. But the ending, the very end, what do you think of that?
Well, going back to, so there's a lieutenant that's been talking to Botanic the whole time. She's kind of like, I would say, a love interest. Like they kind of fall for each other as the movie goes on. And I will say, like, not to be like a sexist or anything like that. I just like, it's the 80s. I'd expect like, she didn't look that attractive. I would just say in the military getup, when she was out of it, she was more attractive. Like when she's in regular civilian clothes. But the whole time I felt like this must be somebody's girlfriend that kind of got put in the movie. She's my least, I think, favorite. I mean, I like the relationship they had, but in terms of, how you just be like looks and acting, she's a little bit weaker in the department.
Right, like if she was a strong performer, you wouldn't question it. Or if she was really beautiful, you would understand the casting.
Yeah.
You'd be like, okay, in the 80s they were just casting for looks, or she's a brilliant performer.
Yeah.
So you felt like she didn't hit the mark either way.
Yeah. Again, I mean, honestly, I feel like she's got to be related to somebody. I mean, I looked at the credit, and this is the only movie that she has. So again, I feel like it's, I don't know if it was a local person or because they got to use the location they gave somebody the part, but. like I said, again, she looked a lot more attractive outside of the civilian clothes, and that happens a lot of times with, when you get your hair pinned back and all that, you can't really see how somebody really looks. But Sergei, Robert Zadar, does have like a great line at the end.
Oh yeah, Sergei. Well, let me set the setting, right. So they frame the military. They call the FBI. FBI gets Federal Bureau of Investigation gets wind of the military. Can they do that? Can the FBI prosecute the military?
I don't think so. Like, I don't think it. No, they can't. No, I don't think about it. Yeah, they can't prosecute it. And those two FBI guys that were like wood in the sticks. I don't know. It's like robots walking out there.
They sucked. Yeah, they were by far the worst.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They arrested the general from the American side, and so you want to get to like the end, or?
Oh yeah. So anyway, they don't explain what the resolution is, but the American general gets in trouble for trying to kill them. The Russian. What happens to the Russian general?
I really don't. I don't know if it's explained.
I think he's fine, right? It's just
Sergei's
he defects to the United States,
wearing like a Miami Vice type suit at the end.
He's dressed perfectly in the suit. No, not a single burn or
scratch.
He looks dynamite.
No bandages.
No horrible skin grafts or anything.
He's ready for a night on the town. Like, the ladies will be all over Sergei.
Right. And what's the line?
Sergei loves all the women. Is that right?
Yeah, Sergei likes all the girls.
All the girls. Yeah. I mean, it's a great line. Honestly, it's probably the best line. So if you want to see that line, you have to watch the whole movie.
I don't know why that reminded me of Street Fighter 2, because it was so happy. They're walking down the stairs, and the couple's there, and they're like, "Oh, do you have any friends for Sergei? Oh, what kind of girls do you like, Sergei? Sergei likes all the girls." And it kind of ends. Feels like it should be a freeze frame with like a thumbs up or something.
Yeah, I feel like the girl, Lieutenant, I think Talvin, she should be like jumping in the air, like, ooh.
Yeah. Yeah, man. I'll go. We shouldn't rip off Joe Bob Briggs with the 4 stars, but we have to have a new rating system, huh?
We got to come up with something. I don't know if it's VHS tapes or I don't know, return boxes or something. Right. I don't know. We'll work on that. But let's just go VHS tapes, I guess.
Okay, I'd say out of 5, I'd say good solid 4. I thought it was great.
I'm with you. A good solid 4. I mean, again, for people that none of you probably know my wife. Besides a few times I've talked to her on the other podcast, but she does not dig these type of movies. Like, typically, she doesn't like the good bad movies like the Miami Connections and the Troll 2s and The Room. But this movie, several times she just stop and watch it. Like, the action is good enough that she would stop and watch it. She made comments about like Christian Bale looking like our star Ted Pryor. Mm-hmm. Like I said, I think she kind of enjoyed it in a way, which is kind of surprising. To me, that's kind of a testament to the movie. My wife, who doesn't dig any of this kind of stuff, dug this movie enough to watch it for quite a period of time.
Yeah, man, it's watchable. It's not that long.
No.
There are parts of it that are like way better than they needed to be. You had said that you had wished that there was like someone could go back to the negative and do a nice like 4K scan of it or something. But I think that would be great, because I think it looks fine the way it is. But you know that if there is a film negative, some of these direct-to-video films never had a film negative, which is the problem. They got the raw footage printed to probably beta, and they cut the beta, and the beta was the master. So that's, for some of these films, it's problematic.
Well, yeah, and a lot of the ones that did have film negatives, I mean, honestly, they could be setting in somebody's house. If it was made by a smaller production company, the director could have it, a producer could have it, just sitting there. And if you know film, it's going to deteriorate after a certain amount of time. So, again, if there is a film print, I would love to do even like a good 1080 version of it, like, a good scan of it, I think, would do a lot of wonders for the film. And I mean, there's a few people that were involved in the movie that have passed away, but it'd be awesome to get like some kind of commentary, with maybe Ted Pryor and anybody else that's available. Like I say, the director unfortunately passed a few years ago, David A. Pryor. Again, the director and Ted Pryor were brothers, and they did Deadly Prey and The Deadliest Prey. And Robert Zadar also, I think, passed in the same year, so unfortunately you wouldn't get like a commentary from both of them. But I think, they could do like a really good quality release of this movie. Maybe package like Deadly Prey, Final Sanction, and maybe another, because David Pryor directed a lot of similar movies like this. And Ted Pryor, the star, going back to the Troma, I guess kind of like bring this to where we started, was in Surf Nazis Must Die.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he was in it. That was one of his first few films. He's from New Jersey. He's a New Jersey guy. So
very cool. Well, that's about all I have. Do you have anything else?
Well, guys, again, we mentioned Spotify, but if you have Spotify, you can check us out there. We're on Podbean, we're on Stitcher, iTunes, pretty much any place that you can find a podcast, we're there. Subscribe if you haven't, share if you want to. We have the Twitch channel. It'd be great if some of you guys would subscribe there as well. That's where the live video will always be. And then in a couple of days, we'll post this feed up on YouTube, so you can subscribe there as well and watch a ton of material from like over 6 years now of doing podcasts, including Tom's. I think your Land of the College Prophets is on there, right?
Yeah, Atlanta College Prophets is on there, and interviews with Debbie Rashawn, Bob Briggs. Anytime we make progress with VHS Massacre 2, we'll try to post a little footage. Like maybe hypothetically we could post like 30 seconds of the Troma stuff behind the scenes, or if we get to shoot at that Oregon Blockbuster, show a little bit of that. So I think the goal is going to be to keep sharing little bits of content as we build the film out.
If you guys would look back, you can see we did a kind of a very similar process. Like there's portions of Debbie Rochon's interview that we had posted before the movie. Joe Bob, that we actually did the whole live stream. Is available, and then we posted, I think, a better version at some point. So we've always shared in the process, and we're looking to continue in that tradition. So we'll give you sometimes it'll be a little taste, and sometimes it might be a little bit of a bigger taste. But
yeah,
just to let you know,
home base is always VHSmassacre.com, so you could find anything we're doing there. So yeah, that's VHSmassacre.com, and I am your host, Tom Seymour,
and I'm your other host, Ken Powell. Check you later.